Welcome back everyone to the fourth episode of the My Generation podcast. On today's show, we'll be talking about storytelling and theatre. I've been writing theatre for many years and had various small scripts put to stage. I love the magic of theatre, seeing your characters being brought to life physically in front of you. So today I wanted to talk to Cleo, an English student and theatre writer from Canterbury, about her experience with theatre. So Cleo, welcome to the show.
Hi Max, thanks for having me.
No problem. So we go to the same theatre writing group, on and off, and I wanted to know just why and what got you into theatre writing.
Well, as with all good things, it was pointed out to me by my mum. And I'd been in drama productions at school and in other local companies as well. But I hadn't really done any of that for a good few years. So my mum saw this writing workshop and she said, would you like to try your hand at it? And I thought because there's always been this really interesting dichotomy between sort of who owns the character, like the writer, the playwright, or the actor who's executing the performance. And, obviously they bring their own interpretation, and some playwrights and writers are more lenient about sort of relinquishing control of their characters than others. But yeah, I've always thought that that's a really interesting dynamic to sort of explore. And where I'd been an actor as such, I thought it would be exciting to see the other side of it.
I came, more from writing. I haven't done much acting, but I think it is interesting because in theatre, comparing to film, which I've written for as well, theatre, the actors have a lot more control than in film for sure, because it's sort of a director's vision in film, but in theatre you give the script to the actors and then you allow them to sort of play with the script, have their own little workshops away from it, so it's quite different. I've been in theatre productions as a kid, but nothing major luckily. But yeah, so you got into it through acting, and how does it now compare to being behind the page, behind the pen? What generates your ideas? What gets you writing?
Well, that is the thing, actually. Those are two separate questions. What generates ideas? I get ideas from all sorts of things, really. Like I remember for a piece that I once did for our group, I don't know if you were there to review it, but I did it about a drug smuggling pigeon. Okay. And it was just because I'd been sitting in the Westgate Gardens and had seen a pigeon walk past. Yeah. So it can be something as small as that, or it can be, wanting to think about a certain relationship dynamic or whatever. Ideas big and small. That's where ideas come from. What gets me writing? I am lazy. So that is a totally different question altogether. Yeah. And I'll often have to sort of haul myself off and give myself an hour to just think and to write and to edit and just to sort of spew it all out as a sort of form of creative therapy, I'd say. So
do you write down your ideas beforehand? You have a journal that you note ideas in, and then you put aside that time and go for it and get them all out? Yeah,
a lot of the time I'll go through life and have ideas on my phone, in the notes on my phone, as I think is more common for sort of writers in the modern day, because it's just so easy. And then I'll give myself sort of a block of time, go on my notes and say, right, I've got these 3 mini ideas, I'll try and write a bit for each of them, and 2 might fall away and I'm left with one that looks like it could be something a bit longer. I guess theatre as a whole can be seen as a kind of therapy for everyone involved, really. Yes, it is very stressful as well, anyone who's ever been in a theatre production will understand that, but it's a therapy for the writer in writing. It's therapy for those who maybe aren't swayed towards writing, because they can act. In acting is definitely a very physical form of sort of release and therapy, and audiences go to be entertained and to let off some steam. I just think it is. I think therapy is the right word for it. I don't know.
You really have acting and writing, but as for 2 separate things. So writing is more for a release of your creative ideas, and acting's more of a physical release of energy.
I suppose. There's certainly overlap. Because, with writing, it's creative ideas, but it's also mental energy, and, your hand can hurt. And obviously with acting, there's the physicality of it, but there is also a mental element when you're working out what your character's about. So there is overlap. I wouldn't like to sort of divide it into 2 separate types of thing, I suppose.
So you go to the theatre writing group, it's the Marlowe Writers Company, and having a routine, especially before when we were both more regular attendees, do you think that helps, having a goal to bring a piece every week, or do you just prefer allotting your time?
I must say I think it helps, and I wish I could commit to it more, because often I'd say having routine is important even in a creative pursuit, but maybe it didn't work for me because, as I said, I am quite lazy, but I should commit to that a bit more, I think.
And what are your ambitions as a writer or playwright?
Well, when I started going to the playwrights last September, I believe it was, I said my ideal was to create a 20-minute radio play would be great. Since going to that class, I've sort of drifted away and then come back to the idea of radio work, because I do find it really interesting. And there's the whole idea. I think it's sort of the essence of theatre, really, because if you look at something like a film, that's got all the post-production and visual aspects and everything, and shot choice and cinematography, and then you strip that back to something like a theatre play, you don't have shots and colour grading and all technical things like that, and then you strip it back once more for the audio, like where there's only the audio element and it's all about the dialogue and how that all plays together. There's not really prop cues or anything. So I think in a way it's like going back to basics in order to build up. So I'd like to do something like that, but only recently I've actually had an idea that I think could be a piece that long.
Yeah.
So I think if I actually take aside some time over the summer, basking in the sun, to actually write something, I could achieve that goal before the next September rolls around.
Yeah, radio is such a different medium as well. You have to really tailor it specifically for audio. I've written some stuff for radio, and it's just you have to focus on interviews, phone calls, things that aren't physical but trying to create an image for people. It's very different to theatre and film, and I think comparing radio to theatre writing that you've done, what would you say are the major differences you feel of those two writing styles?
I guess so. I mean, the good thing with editing is you can sort of write what you want and then think, actually that won't work, and then change it up a bit. But I think the main thing that you've got to avoid, and it's tricky to do in writing for theatre, but it's even trickier to do in writing for radio, is not giving too much obvious exposition, like expositionary dialogue, I guess. The characters saying, "Oh, Paul," but sort of making things too obvious.
That could be a habit in radio where you're like, "Oh, look, I'm walking up to this building which has this."
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah, you need to try and paint a picture just with like sound effects and things. It's not quite it's quite hard, radio writing. I think a lot of people come into writing through film or theatre, and then they don't realise that because you're stripping so much back for radio, that you have to be really clever with the little choices that you make. So obviously,
it's a fun challenge, though.
Yeah, and I think I'd recommend it to anyone.
Certainly.
But going back to the theatre writing more specifically, you've obviously been involved with it for almost a year now, and it's growing and changing what your goals have been regarding it.
I lost the deadline for the Raw showcase that's coming up, but then I found it a couple of days ago, and it's actually later than I thought it was. So I thought I might, with this extra time I've happened upon, I might actually really try and push myself to get something out, even if it's a bit rough around the edges, just to meet that deadline, because that's something, as aforementioned, I've sort of struggled with. So I think if I really put a lot of my energy into that, then I would like to be a part of that showcase. I mean, you've had stuff in London, haven't you?
Yes.
How was that for you?
That was interesting. I had a 1-minute little showcase of a short script as part of something that Bashir Productions were doing, and it was just a 1-minute play as part of a larger collection, and it was so strange in a good way to see, because obviously in the showcases we've had, it's been like rehearsed readings we've had, but this has been very much like you're actually seeing people performing something you've done, and it's very surreal. I
presume you didn't know the actors?
No introduction or anything. I just submitted it and then came along as an audience member. I was like the rest of the crowd. But hearing the character names and seeing people performing your words, there's something magical about it, and there was nerves.
Oh.
Obviously a lot of nerves. I also had the larger play put on as well, which had a lot more nerves.
But, of course, yeah, I went to see that, I think.
You did?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, as a writer, because in theatre I feel like you're much more powerless. Not to say that makes theatre writing bad, but as a writer you put together your script. The director twists it for their vision.
Yeah.
And then the actors twist it for their vision too. So it goes through many people once you finish writing. And if I published my play that I've had the 60-minute piece and that went out, it would be interpreted by a director differently and then actors differently beyond that. It's not going to be anywhere near the same as what got shown before. And I think that's something that only really theatre's got, where it goes through so many creative processes. But there's always nerves because you have so much less control unless you're a writer-director.
I mean, with that play, what was it called? I want to call it the Brexit play, but what was it called?
It was called To Be Decided.
Yeah. With To Be Decided, am I wrong in saying that it was quite an experimental script anyway?
Yes, yeah, the script had a lot of impromptu bits from the actors as well, and there were certain things that it had to be quite fixed to a historical timeline, and so I had to explore certain events, and I had to have the impromptu bits, and then there was sort of micro scenes that could more be my own. So it was a really great process, but very experimental.
Yeah.
But
with what you said about relinquishing control to like a director and then to actors, did you feel that was intensified by the fact that the script was quite fluid to begin with, or were you all right with that? Or
I think it was actually quite nice because it took a bit of pressure off me, because I could write my bits, get the feedback, and then go away and do more drafts and update it as to what they wanted. And I think that was a good thing, because I was given the freedom to write whatever I wanted, really, because it was quite a fluid play. And then I'd be given the feedback and it would sort of hone itself more toward the end. And despite that it was quite an experimental piece, I think that's quite common in theatre, to have something that's, as a writer, it's changing and chopping and moving a lot. And I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, yeah.
But it's good to take a step back from your work, not be so precious about it. Because I used to be precious about my work. I don't know if you agree. And you have to just say, this is the final draft, and now you go and make it.
When you first asked me to do this, I started sort of thinking about what I might say, and I found I was thinking about, like, certainly in my case, sort of a bit of a perfectionist. I sort of think, what's the point in following through with it or even making it any better? I want to come up with something good and make it even better, and that's not a healthy or realistic way to write. But in writing more and encouraging myself to write more, as in more frequently, in journals or little short story competitions or whatever, or in theatre, writing little skits and longer pieces, I've certainly lost sort of the preciousness and the inhibitions I had about making sure that every line was perfect.
I think the theatre writing group especially does that, because every week when you take a new piece, yes, you get praise at the start, but then you can get grilled.
Oh, and yes.
I think that might sound intimidating to listeners, but you might agree that it's a really good thing, because you aren't so precious anymore, because you are literally getting exactly what you need. You get so much feedback, and you can apply that. And would you agree that really helped in sort of stripping back levels of perfectionism so that you just do it?
I'd say it helps in stripping back levels of perfectionism, but I'd also say it definitely helps stripping back levels of priority, because in hearing other people's comments about what you've written, I know certainly in my case, there's some things I think, okay, thanks for that, I'll take that on board. And there are other things that I think, no, I like this just how it is. So it does help with the editing process, because instead of looking at this thing that you've created and going, okay, I need to edit it, where do I start? You start to realise which bits you're okay with and which bits don't need to be edited, and then which bits aren't, making so much sense and need a bit more finessing. It's a push and pull, you keep hold of the things and the ideas that you've put in that you really like, even when people want to take them away.
Yeah, I like the idea of a push and pull, because you can take on board what someone says, but you don't have to, so you still have your own creative control. Because I remember I did take a script to Paul Skinner, who runs our writing group, and he's been absolutely influential in all my writing. But I remember one week he got really, not angry, but very passionately loved an idea I had, but I was writing it very experimentally, and he just wanted to tear my head off because I wouldn't write it exactly how he wanted it, because he was so happy with the idea, and he just wanted me to not be so pretentious.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. We love Paul. We love Paul's help, but at the end of the day, it's your piece. So if there are ideas, if you were really not wanting to move it out of a certain experimental voice, I personally don't think there's anything wrong with that.
And have you been submitting some of your own work to various competitions locally?
I haven't done for theatre writing yet, so that's why I think I'm going to gear up for this raw competition. It's a competition that leads to a showcase, and it's for new writers around Kent, I believe, and it's called Raw, in a beautiful double entendre. It's spelt raw like a lion's roar, because you're supposed to be expressing, a new voice, and then it also sounds like raw as in raw material. I could have gotten stuck on a terrible loop there. So I really like that. But it's to encourage new writers to write and submit pieces, and then. But
they only select a handful. It's one or two, and they're longer. They're not the 10 minutes. They're
the 45 minutes sort of.
And the 10-minute ones are the ones you get through the theatre writing. So you get it. They're staged, but you have them just holding the scripts and reading them to you, to an audience, which is also great, because I remember when I first joined the theatre writing group, my first day was the deadline for one of those showcases, and Paul just said, hey, you haven't done this before, but do you want to just submit something? So I ran home that night and I wrote a terrible short script, and I knew it was bad at the time, but it was something.
Yeah.
And I submitted it, and it got staged, and it went all right. I was happy. And
I was going to say, with relating to my point about the more you write, the more you lose your inhibitions, and how I've sort of learned that over forcing myself to write more. I've always admired you for how quickly you can crank out a script, and sometimes it's really, really good, and sometimes I've always admired your sort of commitment to that, and how you can do that. I could do, and I'm trying to learn how to do, really.
Well, everyone's got their own different process. I know there's someone at the group who doesn't she takes her time with it, really takes her time, Sarah. She absolutely loves to go all in on one idea, and she paints a more vivid world than I do, I think, with her writing, and it's more specific and specialised, because she prepares so much before she starts putting pen to paper of the actual script. So her scripts take ages to write, but there's much more depth, I think, in her work. So I think everyone's got their own style. So Charles, he also tends to put out work quite quickly, because he's got his style is 4 people in a room talking.
Yeah.
And
he does it well.
It sounds boring, but it's really, really clever. And he always has a unique situation for those 4 people. And I don't know, I sort of pride myself on every idea kind of being very, very different. I don't really have one voice.
I was going to say, with Sarah and how she takes her time, I know she's quite influenced by the stuff she reads, like the literature she reads. And I wondered if you have any inspirations like that, or if you do just sort of pick inspiration from...
That was going to be my next question for you. I think for me, influences are kind of what I see in films.
Yeah.
Especially when I went to the group a little bit more heavily than I do now. I was watching a film every day, every other day, and I sort of meshed them together, and then a little bit of my personal life, and then that's an idea. So there's always some sort of little bit I've consumed in the media or seen around the high street or something, and just seen, because now that I'm actually kind of out a lot more and seeing new people, I'm listening to their stories. I'm trying to be a better listener, because...
Well, I guess that's why you got this podcast.
Yeah, because if I can take what someone said, and I mean, I've had some really great conversations, even if it's just casually and socially going to like a pub just to meet new people. I mean, last Saturday I went to one where I met about 20 new people for the first time, and hearing their stories, you pick bits out, and those are the bits that sit in your subconscious ready to go. And I was wondering what for you those inspirations are.
Well, with what you said, just then about, going to the pub and meeting new people. I'm in the incredibly privileged position of working in a bakery. So I have lots of regular customers and people, and I've worked there. I'm actually about to leave for the summer, which is really sad. But I've worked there for the best part of 2 years.
Nice.
And you get the same people coming in every single week. And then you do get people who just pass by. And over these 2 years, I have learnt about these people. It is like a fresh offering of characters to you every time I work.
Yeah, and you can sort of mix and match in a way people's stories and certain characters that feel like they fit more dramatically in another situation, because you're trying to... I had a lecturer that used to talk all about conflict and resolution, how you want to put two characters together that are going to butt heads, and that creates drama.
Yeah.
And would you agree that pretty much all drama kind of stems from conflict in some form?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that idea before. I don't know. I'm just trying to think if I can give a conflicting idea to that. Create some drama, but no.
Because I heard, in fact, there's another Paul I know who, in fact, last week's episode, the one going up before this, we talked about badminton, we talked about sport and community, and Paul, who runs that badminton group, brought a very interesting idea to me, one that we haven't been able to break. This statement he uses to summarise all films.
All films, right.
All films are either...
I'm fresh out of a film A level, so I'm going to try and
break
give my 2 cents.
Because I tried to break this as well, and there were only a handful of movies that even came close. And it was that films fall into one of 2 categories. They're either might is right or love conquers all. So either power struggle, so might is right, or love conquers all. And films only fall into those 2 camps. And nothing will break that. And it was a very interesting point because we spent, and I'll be honest with you, we spent the best part of 3.5 hours trying to think of a film that broke this. And shall I tell you what probably the closest 1 or 2 we came to?
What?
We came to, I thought of either Dog Star Man, which is an experimental film from the 60s. Buried from 2013 with Ryan Reynolds.
I must say I haven't seen it.
Well, that's a film where a guy's locked in a coffin for the whole movie. Because we tried to whittle it down to films that had just one character with no real conflict. But it was actually a Might is Right story.
Well, I don't know. I saw a film last night called Lucky. I don't know if you've seen it or heard about it. It was the last film that starred Harry Dean Stanton. And it was sort of written for him. And I guess you could kind of say it takes inspiration from Love Conquers All and Might is Right, but I certainly wouldn't brand it as either. It's about this. It's set in Arizona in sort of the desert, and it's actually got a cameo from David Lynch.
Okay.
And he plays one. He doesn't direct it. I think one of his relatives is directing it actually, but not him. He's a character in it.
Yeah.
I had no idea he was so fit.
That's making it.
Yeah, all right, exposed. And there was a sort of weird, very Lynchian sequence in it that came out of nowhere, really, because it's quite a happy-go-lucky, if you'll pardon the pun, film. Who's 89 or 90 or something. He lives alone. He smokes like a chimney. He does 5 yoga exercises a day, and he just lives his life, and he does the same thing every day in this tiny Arizona town. And it's just about his life, really. And he has a fall, but that's not even it's not even a big part of the film. He goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, you smoke and everything, but you're in perfect health. If you were going to die, you would have done by now, really. Yeah. If any of the, stroke, cancers, if any of that was going to kill you, it would have done by now. So you're sort of immortal in a way. And then he starts thinking about, the fact that he is going to die, and if he's all right with that, and why people are there, really.
Is it about a love for life?
But that's kind of what I was thinking.
Well, then love has conquered all.
With the love conquers all thing. Because he is this big cynic, and then in the end he does become a little bit sort of teary-eyed.
Yeah.
But
I don't like to necessarily put stories into necessarily thinking about it like that, because then you can just brand everything into camps, whereas stories are obviously a lot more complex. Mm-hmm. But I just thought it was interesting that we tend to, as humans, talk about the same kind of things. Would you say there's any specific themes that recur within your writing? Because we've explored sort of auteur theory quite a lot, if you know.
Yeah, I'm aware.
And where certain directors have specific things they always go back to, and I've explored Darren Aronofsky quite heavily.
What are his auteur features?
Religious influence, metaphors. His films are quite metaphorical. He likes dialogue to feel quite poetic. He's big on his rule of thirds regarding timelines. He's very experimental. He likes to have one male protagonist who is basically destroying themselves with pushing a passion too far.
Right.
So quite specific.
That makes a lot of sense.
But that tends to be his things that he falls into. But for you, are there specific things that you always come back to as a writer?
I focus on relationships a lot, as well, I suppose, as do most writers, really. I don't even mean romantic relationships, but I'm just thinking I'd find it difficult to write, certainly at this point, maybe in my later writing career I might learn to develop my skills. But certainly right now, I'd find it difficult to write a scene that only had male characters. Because I am a woman, and I'd certainly like to push the boundaries of that, but I'd like to make it believable. And right now, female is sort of what I know.
Yeah.
So I know that I do the most justice in the female characters I write.
I feel the same in the opposite angle. I tried to write one story with a female protagonist, and it didn't quite feel as authentic as other scripts I've written have been before. And I think my favourite scripts I've written have been ones. One I don't even think I've shown you or the group, which is I wrote after the Brexit play, because I wanted to write something really casual and funny. Because Brexit's quite a heavy topic. I wanted to write something fun, and I wrote it was 3 male brothers all in a house together, and that was it. And what unfolds over the course of one evening. So instead of spanning the whole of history and how it's all led up to Brexit, instead of that, I went 3 dudes in a house for one night, because I wanted to do the opposite. And that's actually one of my favourite things I've written at the minute, because it's quite simple to stage, and it felt true to me because I was writing about characters I could understand. And being from Kent, I actually tried to set it within Kent, so there's Kentish references, and it felt nice to just have something really grounded and something that isn't changing the world. It's very different.
One of the first pieces I actually did for the group was about the friendship between 2 girls, 2 sort of mid-teenage girls, so a little bit younger than me, one of whom was sort of suffering with anorexia. And I took it to like a scene's length, and for whatever, it really frustrated me because I liked what I started with, but I couldn't find a way to push it any further. And I did sort of think about balancing the female energy of like the strong female friendship with a male figure like like maybe her father, or if we had like a male doctor or something like that. But because I struggled to even continue to get that piece further, I struggled to sort of give myself the opportunity to introduce characters like that. So I would like to revisit it at some point, but I don't know, maybe this will inspire me to
go back to...
Yeah.
So, and relating to, take for example, and you can take any piece that you've written so far in your life, picture it's been staged, and you've just come to the end of it being performed. What do you think the audience are taking away from your piece? So you've come out of the theatre having just seen the first piece written by Cleo performed on stage. What are people talking about in the lobby afterwards? What's the feeling? What are you trying to get them to feel?
My goodness, Max, you're not pulling any punches.
The
I'm going to have
questions.
To an extent, every playwright, the reason why they write something that in the end will be, performed to a group of people, it's slightly different from like an author of a novel who will write a book and then maybe not even know how many people will read it. With a play, you are setting yourself for people to see this thing that you've created. So I guess every playwright wants their work to have a sense of relatability and sort of universal.
So is it like connecting with a niche as well? Because you said you write for sort of a female audience, young female characters. if someone saw that piece, you reckon it would be quite relatable for a young teenage girl watching?
Well, I suppose so, but it's like, if we take the character, I've just remembered that I was so sort of detached from this piece and I got so stuck with it, I actually didn't even name the girls. I called them 1 and 2.
Yeah.
I think if a young girl watches that and identifies with 2, on the nose because she too has suffered from an eating disorder or whatever,
yeah, fair
enough, that's one form of alignment. I'd also like potentially an 80-year-old man or someone like Lucky to watch that and recognise maybe a string of vulnerability that's in themselves. I believe it's possible for people to take things from anything.
Yeah,
really.
I have 2 examples to bring up on that. So I took my sister to see a movie called Booksmart, if you've seen that.
When I mentioned female friendships earlier, that was literally in my head.
I
have seen it.
Yeah, because she's sort of at that point in her life.
Really?
And when I had to show it to her because I think she was really down after the week she had because she's writing exam periods at the minute.
Bless her.
So she's working so hard, and I know that she doesn't really like films, but that she likes things really light-hearted and things that sort of relate to her age, and it just seemed absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
And when I went, I enjoyed the humour. So I went and I was just laughing and having a great time, but I think what made that film great for me was her and how much she loved it. And then another example relating to my sister, although she's not in this story. Last night I went to the theatre to see, I think it was called Ace Face. My friend Edie from the University of Kent had a performance on, and she was the music director. I went up to see it. It was about Mods versus the Rocks.
Oh, right.
And about how they interacted after a fight on the beach, basically. So had a fight on Margate Beach, and about how some of the Mods and the Rocks have to still interact with each other in real life. And there was, I won't try and spoil too much of the story, but on the Rock side of it, they had 3 siblings, and their relationship made me think a lot more about my own relationship with my own sister. So a lot of people come out of that thinking, oh yeah, great rock music. When we came to the end, the people around me were like, I really enjoyed the music in that, and I enjoyed the humour. And I was just thinking about my sister and our relationship. And so you're right, everyone takes something different from a piece. Sometimes not what you even expect. So I don't think anyone was expecting someone to go away and think about their relationship with their sister because of something about the Mods versus the Rocks. So you think primarily that there's something in your writing for everyone to take away?
Maybe not now with how I write at the moment, but I'd like to achieve that kind of level. And obviously if you look at like Fleabag Mania at the moment, I don't know if you've seen any of Fleabag.
No.
But it's certainly very woman orientated. I would recommend you watch it. It's very woman orientated. I've spoken to women in my life. I've spoken to girls in my life. I've certainly spoken to adult men who have all found it enchanting, who have found themselves reflected in it, even though it's about sort of a posh young woman living in London.
My dad did watch Fleabag.
What did he think about it? He's probably going to butt my...
Yeah, he did enjoy it.
Yeah. So I think, I don't want to say, get rid of themes and branding, but I think, the more you close yourself off to something, it's a shame because you could find something in it. Would you have seen Booksmart without your sister?
Not probably. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just sort of stuff like that.
I'm trying to watch things that are a little bit different because one of my favourite movies that Darren Aronofsky directed called The Fountain, which is about coping with death.
Really?
And that's absolutely my favourite movie of all time. And that is a very Might is Right and Love Conquers All movie. But because the main character is trying to fight the idea of death. He's trying to save his dying wife.
God.
And that movie is absolutely eloquent. But I'm trying to explore other movies that have those same themes. So there's a Taiwanese movie, I think, that I wouldn't have considered watching usually. And I'm only halfway through watching it, actually. And it's about that idea of a person who is dead coming back.
It's Thai. Yeah, it won the...
Because it has the guy with the red eyes, doesn't it?
I haven't watched it, but it is up in like my top 5 to watch this. Uncle Boonmee, who can recall his previous lives.
That's the one.
It won the, what's it called, the Palme d'Or, I think, a couple of years ago.
Because I was looking at David Lowery's A Ghost Story, which is another one of my favourite movies.
I haven't seen the whole of that. I've seen sort of maybe the first half an hour, but yeah.
And it was on the recommendeds for that, and I was thinking I should probably branch out. But A Ghost Story is beautiful, absolutely. The first half an hour is very slow, but that film will make you feel tiny and small and crushed by the end. It's absolutely beautiful. I can't recommend it enough. You should watch it.
Yeah, I will go back on my Netflix.
And because that explores having to still live life, even if you're not there, and then having to see what's happening with a partner, but not being able to do anything because you're dead. And it's such a strange looking movie because the character obviously walks around in that ghost sheet, which looks childish and hilarious, but you get 5 minutes into seeing that on the screen and it crushes you because of what you are exposed to seeing. And I think actually that's one of the movies that's inspired me the most in my theatre writing. But would you say that there's specific movies or theatre pieces that you've seen that kickstarted you in writing?
Certainly a film that has kickstarted my writing more recently was a couple of months ago. I rewatched Carol. I don't know if you've seen it. It's on Netflix. And it's set in the 1950s, and it's about a lesbian relationship between an older and a younger woman, but the age difference it's not really a theme in the film. It's more about how in the time in which they live, they couldn't express their love for each other in public at all, and hardly in private, to be honest. During the process of filming, the screenwriter and the director consulted the main 2 actresses, Kate Blanchett and Rooney Mara, to strip back the dialogue as much as possible, so that and this is something that you can't really achieve in theatre as much as cinema, but so that the longing glances that they have are really accentuated. Although I think this next bit does apply to theatre, the stuff that isn't said is more important than the stuff that is said. I've sort of been inspired by that.
There's
to think about the power of dialogue, and as I said, what is more important, what is said or what isn't said.
Well, sometimes stripping back, and not actually showing it all at the start. Sometimes just hiding stuff and showing an interesting opening is quite interesting. I know one of my plays opens with just a person coming into a room and a body on the floor, and you have no answers to any questions. You only have questions, and that's what kind of allows you to stay interested. But interestingly, I've heard about I haven't seen the whole movie. It's called Lady Vengeance by Wong Kar-wai.
Oh yeah,
which is a forbidden love story, and every time the two, it's a male and female, but it is forbidden, and every time they're near each other, it goes to slow motion, so that it shows that because they're looking at each other, that they are still like trying to hold on to this, even though it's not long. So in real time, they see each other for 10 seconds, but the movie drags it to like 2 or 3 minutes. So that's only really something you can gain from cinema.
You've got to be more crafty with theatre, but I think you can still achieve those subtleties. But it is more in, the dialogue, I guess, is your main tool. I don't know if you'd agree with that. Yeah,
theatre is a very talky medium, which is similar to radio as well, although radio is kind of changing at the minute, where it's not quite as talky as it used to be. It used to just be things like The Archers, which still has its place. What would you say, because we've talked about with slow motion and camera angles and things, and we've talked about for radio, sound painting a picture, what would you say, this is a difficult question, is theatre's unique things, the things that you can only do in theatre and in no other medium?
Even though with cinema you can break the fourth wall and look into the camera, and with radio, you can directly address your audience with your voice. Having a physical person stand in front of you and address you, you know, it is different.
It's feeling closer to the action.
Yeah, for sure. Audience immersion is sort of all the rage in all media, but I think in theatre goes that extra mile.
Yeah,
I don't know if you'd agree with me.
Yeah, because they can ask you questions. I mean, you've got like the pantomime where...
Yeah.
I mean, do you go to the pantomime much in Canterbury?
I have been, not for a few years, but something like pantomime. I'm a lover of pantomime, I'm a champion of pantomime, but I sort of can't help but feel that with the current climate, it sort of should have died out a couple of years ago. I don't know if you get me. I like that it's still here.
Well, it's one of those things that should have died out, but because it hasn't, it's got its place. Yeah. I think people thought that radio would die out with the invention of podcasts. But, I mean, I work in radio. The medium is still thriving, and there's a reason for that. And I think it's because radio is the loneliest medium, I think, because it's for the people that are sat in their car on the way to work. It's for the person cleaning up at home. It's for the person who doesn't have anyone else in the room with them. And the reason why I make these podcasts, and I have to tell myself this when I go to work because it makes me love it even more in radio, is that I'm giving the person who's lonely someone to talk to. And when I look at it like that, every single day at work's fun because you know that there's someone on the end who's sat in a room on their own, or in the car on their own, who's got a dialogue. And because you can either call in or like on this show, you can leave comments to let everyone know what your opinions are. You can do that. And I don't think there's other mediums that can do it. But that was Cleo and I having what we've had to say so far on storytelling and theatre. But have you got a story to tell about the subject? If so, feel free to leave us a comment on YouTube or contact the Facebook page at the My Generation Podcast, and we'll feature comments over the next few weeks. So get your thoughts in. We'll get them back to Cleo as well. Next, we're going to tease next week's topic. So we've got upcoming topics with guests already booked. We've got 2 episodes that I can talk about that are currently booked and in the process of being made. So we have solo travelling. We have Michael Hugh, who is going to be talking about solo travelling. He's currently in America at the minute, as of the time of recording this. And he's travelled all over the UK doing solo travelling, and we're going to be hearing from him. And we're going to be hearing from Stephen Barwick, just got that book today, and he's going to be talking about trains, why we travel, the love of trains that still seems to be maintained despite everyone thinking that it's sort of a dying thing, and the romance of the steam engine, and all of that good stuff. So we'll be going back to Cleo in just a moment to wrap up our final thoughts on storytelling and theatre. But there are future topics that we still are looking for people to talk about. So, if you have a story relating to mindfulness and meditation, please do get in touch. Maybe you meditate now, or you do yoga, or you've done so in the past. Get in touch. We want to hear your story. We're also looking for a guest regarding something similar to what we've been talking about today, acting and expression. We've talked about more of the writing angle of it, but we'd like someone who's actually on the stage. Maybe you've just recently been in a play. Maybe you do vocal work for radio, or you're an actor for film. I want to hear from you if you're aged between 18 and 30 and live in Kent. If you'd like to be featured on the show, or you're a local musician, then please do get in touch, as we sometimes share music on the show. Emails, links in the description, or you can message the Facebook page at the My Generation Podcast. Again, all links in the description. So, Cleo, just wanting to wrap up our conversation about storytelling and theatre. So, obviously, we've talked about the theatre writing group, the Marlowe one in Canterbury. We often touch upon a local impact in the Kent area, as all of our guests are from Kent. And for listeners who might be interested in the Kent life and what's available here, what would you say for an up-and-coming writer of any medium, closely attached to you or actor, would be a good step locally?
I think people can overlook what we have in Kent a lot, like the Marlowe and like the Little Theatre in Herne Bay, for example. That's where I have performed. You know, we have a plethora of theatres and theatre companies and stuff just below the surface. And if you write, people are like, these companies are always looking for new stuff. It's unlikely that you're going to get totally turned away. And I would encourage persistence, because if you make these contacts, you never know when they're going to be of use to you in your writing career.
Yeah.
I'd say. You know, you can find encouragement in Kent. You really can.
And obviously also places for inspiration as well. You said you were just in a park watching pigeons.
Yeah, I mean, certainly get a lot of pastoral inspiration from Kent, what with it being, you know, the Garden of England and all that. So, you know, you get some good natural themes, but don't think that just because you don't live in London, you know, or the big smoke where everything's going on, you can't find things that are just as interesting. Like, honestly, as I mentioned before, working in the bakery has been the biggest privilege, because it's just given me stacks of notebooks of ideas for characters and for situations and stuff. So try and... It's like... I do actually have a quote. Nora Ephron, who wrote... she did screenplays. She wasn't much of a theatre writer, I don't think. Don't quote me on that. But she wrote Sleepless in Seattle, I think. And her mother said to her, everything is copy. That's the quote. Everything is copy. So you can take something from anything. If you have, you know, a full-blown conversation about the world and your place in it with someone you have a crush on, you know, you can take anything and form something from it, I'd say.
Yeah. No, it makes sense, because everyone steals. All good writers steal something.
Yeah.
It's like what I said before about how I'll watch 3 or 4 films, kind of mash them together and then put a little bit of me in it, and then that's an idea.
Yeah, precisely.
So every idea comes from...
Everything is copy. And I think a really important thing is own the embarrassing things that happen to you, because they will turn out to be the best stories that you tell.
But no, that was me and Cleo talking about storytelling and theatre. Thank you for coming on, Cleo. Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Max.
No problem. And will we be able to get you back on the show at some point in the future?
Maybe. Give me an interesting topic.
Well, that was Cleo and I talking about storytelling and theatre. We look forward to hearing your comments in the comments below. We've got very exciting episodes coming up in the future. So thank you for listening. And we will be back with the next episode of the My Generation podcast next week. Thank you all.